lives, that will change history, 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 that will change history. That will be the most beautiful day.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in this evening for our Ukraine War Report for the 27th of June, 2022. We are now on day 125, well, 125 in Ukraine. Again, good morning to Ukraine. Again, coming at you guys from the East Coast here, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so it's a little bit later than we usually do these reports. I was preoccupied with something a little bit earlier, but again, I'm glad all of you are tuning in, taking some time out of your day to get filled in on what's going on in this ongoing and, again, very bloody conflict that is occurring in Europe, in Ukraine. We're still on day 124 here for the next 2 hours, but technically in Ukraine it's day 125 of the war. 125 days this war has been going on. It seems like just yesterday the Russians walked over the border on the 24th of February into Ukraine, and now all of a sudden we are here all these months later. Again, this war is still continuing on. We're going to get you guys all filled in on what's been going on in Ukraine. First of all, though, we're going to, again, take a moment here just to say hello to everybody in the chat. Mythical, Miss Tiger Eye, Takey Jakey, Annette, Uktin. All you guys, thank you so much for tuning in this evening. Speedy Squirrel, Miss Fishy Fish Eye Eater, Trevor, thank you guys so much. Everybody that has been tuning in here day after day to get your information, to get filled in on what's going on in Ukraine. I've said this before and I'll say it again. I'm not here telling you what's happening. I'm here telling you what we are seeing as a community. What intel are we gathering as a community here? That's primarily why we're here. We're here to look at just the raw evidence, the raw reports, the raw videos, the raw pictures, all of that content that's coming out of the combat theater there in Ukraine. We're going to start this evening really quickly with our gas prices roundup. Fuel prices in the U.S. and abroad have been going down for about the past week or so here. I think we're creeping into the week and a half mark here. $4.89 a gallon today is today's national average here in the United States. So this plays into some things I'm going to talk about later in tonight's report. Again, reminding those of you that don't know that these fuel prices are directly affected by what is going on in Ukraine, and thus trickles down to the prices on all of our goods and services increasing. Again, fears of a recession are growing here in the United States. And so there's a lot at play here. Also, there's some news about diesel prices separately that I'm going to hopefully get to tomorrow in tomorrow night's report. However, I have this article really quickly tonight. Gas prices tumble, but how low will they go? Again, coming from AAA.com here. This is where we've been tracking these fuel prices over the past few weeks. I personally expect that these fuel prices are going to bounce back up in the coming weeks, but again, we're going to have to keep our eyes closely on that situation, and we'll keep you guys posted on that. If you guys want to hit that like button real quick, it's the best way to get the algorithm's attention, get this information into the hands of more people. If you want to sound off in the chat where you're tuning in from tonight and what your fuel prices are looking like, we'll read off a couple of those. Michelle Welch says $4.39 in Missouri. Ron Burroquin says, so are we celebrating $4.89? No, I don't think we're celebrating just yet. I don't think we're out of the woods when it comes to those fuel prices just yet, but we're going to keep you guys updated on what that's looking like. Speedy Squirrel says $4.29 in UAE. HM Producer says still about $7 a gallon there in SoCal. So those prices are still looking pretty high out there in California. Miss Tiger Eye 912 says 458 to 469 in New Orleans area. Temp in the upper 80s today. Sounds pretty toasty down there in New Orleans today. I could tell you it's about 88 degrees in my my studio at the moment. So also a little toasty here. Rick Patton says, Pittman says, paid $6.25 a gallon here in San Diego today. So California is still seeing those vastly increased prices over the rest of the country. Pocket Frog tuning in says $4.99 in PA, so that's still pretty high. A lot of us are still seeing $5 gallons. I'm still seeing, I know us here, we're still at like the $4.99 mark where I'm tuning in from. So again, I think all of us are still kind of suffering from these increased fuel prices this ties in directly to what's going on in Ukraine. I've also talked about the groceries, why our food prices are increasing as well. Again, that's directly correlated, and we're going to keep you guys filled in on the new developments that we're getting out, the new developments that are coming in here, new reports that are coming in here on all of this this economic crisis that is happening alongside the very bloody conflict which is occurring in Ukraine, of course. Now, speaking of which, we're going to switch gears now over from our fuel prices. Again, hearty hello to everybody that's tuning in this evening. We're going to get you guys started with our primary headlines for today. The big topic that's been in the news today, again, is that missile hit on that crowded shopping mall in the central Ukrainian city of Kremenchuk. The regional governor originally had said that at least 13 people were killed, and Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelensky accused Russia of trying to sabotage people's normal lives, targeting a site with over 1,000 people believed inside the post no military threat. Monday also saw deadly attacks in other Ukrainian cities, including Kharkiv and Lysychansk, which we'll kind of go into more depth later on. Ukrainian authorities said more than 50 Russian missiles hit cities across Ukraine over the weekend. Now, switching back to Kremenchuk there for a second, our latest report says that that death toll has been increased from 13 to now 15. Again, Dmytro Lunin, the head of the Poltava Regional Military Administration, has revised the death toll from Monday's strike on that shopping mall in Kremenchuk to 15, according to a post on his Telegram channel from earlier today. Again, earlier in the day, when updating the number of fatalities, Lunin indicated it could continue to climb, tweeting, "It's too early to talk about the final number of dead people. There's still not only military servicemen at that site, but there's rescue services and also investigators are there. They're still pulling people out of the rubble at this very hour. They're still investigating what has occurred there, and arguably there are people that are wounded in hospital that might eventually succumb to their injuries as well. We just don't know. We don't know enough information yet. Again, these strikes are still new, and again, I've said this before, during the fog of war, it takes time for us to get concrete information on what is going on. Speaking of the strike on that mall, the Biden administration came out condemning those attacks, saying Russia's attack on civilians at shopping mall is, quote, cruel. Again, in that Monday tweet, this came directly from President Joe Biden, again, who's in Germany attending that G7 summit. I actually have an article here basically talking about how all of the G7 leaders just came out unanimously and condemned these strikes, of course, that happened at that mall in Ukraine. And so I'll probably be reading off a few of those over the course of the night here. So again, there's also strikes that have occurred in Kharkiv and Lysychansk. We're going to go into the specifics on those when we get into our open source reports at the end of the show, and when we get into our community aggregated reports, which are coming up next. I know we have some information, some videos, and some stuff to show you guys of those strikes, of the attacks, of the fighting that is happening in and around Kharkiv and Lysychansk. Again, just to reiterate, Ukrainian authorities said more than 50 Russian missiles hit cities across Ukraine over the weekend. I actually have a map. I think it was posted by operator Starsky. earlier today, if I'm not mistaken. I'll try to get that brought up on screen, showing all of the regions that had been hit by some of those Russian missiles, and it's like the entire Ukraine has been struck again over the weekend. So not only are we getting filled in on what has been going on over the past 12 to 24 hours, but I'm also going to be reaching back into the weekend, of course, as we don't do these live reports over the weekend, and I'll get you guys filled in on what's been going on Saturday, Sunday, and into Monday. Moving on, NATO aims to increase the strength of its rapid reaction force from 40,000 to 300,000 troops. The alliance's Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said during a statement, I believe that was today. Stoltenberg called the change part of the biggest overhaul of collective defense and deterrence since the Cold War. NATO allies will meet this week in Madrid and are also expected to approve additional aid to Ukraine. So again, NATO is increasing the amount of troops. They're increasing again from 40,000 with this rapid reaction force up to 300,000 troops in this rapid reaction force. Again, this is a new statement that just came out today from that Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg of the NATO alliance. Again, basically saying this is the biggest ramping up of deterrence and defense since the Cold War. NATO allies will meet again in Madrid. They're going to discuss basically the specifics there. On that additional aid that's going into Ukraine. We'll be covering that in the coming days. Meanwhile, Zelensky met with via video with a group of 7 leaders at their summit in Germany, and he urged all of them to approve more military aid for his country. The G7 leaders pledged in a statement to, quote, continue to provide financial, humanitarian, military, and diplomatic support and stand with Ukraine as long as it takes. Again, quick shout out to everybody that's tuning in tonight for this late report. Again, coming at you guys about 2 hours later than we usually do, but I'm glad to see quite a few familiar faces in the chat and quite a few new people as well. We're just getting started with our main headlines here. If you haven't already, please hit that like button. Best way to get this information into the hands of more people, get the algorithm's attention. Moving on here, Russia appears to have defaulted, and I've talked about this quite a bit over the past a month or so. We've talked about Russia's economic situation. Again, it appears now that they have defaulted on their foreign debt for the first time in over a century. After sanctions blocked the country's efforts to pay interest to its overseas creditors, Russian officials reject the designation as artificially forced by the West because Russia has the money, but the U.S. Treasury in May closed the last pathway for American investors to receive debt payments. In practical terms, little impact is expected immediately as Russia already faces many punishments that might befall an economy in default. Again, a lot of these sanctions kind of take time to kick in, especially, and I've talked about this before, Russia has spent years, they've spent over 20 years fortifying their economy for this exact scenario, okay? Fortifying their economy for an eventual war where sanctions would be employed. All right, they've had to deal with sanctions in the past. 2014, they had to deal with sanctions. 2008, they've had to deal with sanctions since the start of the Russian Federation. They've been dealing with some form of sanctions. Okay, and so they've prepared themselves. They've prepared themselves as a country. They've fortified their economy to take a hit, to take multiple hits like this from the West, from these sanctions. But the key point here is for how long they can keep up that game. How long can they hold their ground against these sanctions before they start to wear on their own people? Okay, I've talked about this before. It's not about the Russian government themselves. It's not about the oligarchs. It's about the people. Once the Russian people start to really feel the impact is when you'll start to see more lashing back. Okay, and that's been a huge contributing factor here within Russia, motivating the Russian people to stand up against what is going on in Ukraine. And we saw at the beginning of the war, there were many protests with thousands and thousands of people that broke out. The Russian government, cracked down on a lot of that. I think we'll see a resurgence of that more and more, especially as the pressure is put on the Kremlin from people, basically getting disgruntled. Okay, from increased food prices, increased fuel prices. I've been tracking a lot of the food prices and a lot of the fuel prices in Russia. There hasn't been too many crazy increases, at least across the board. In certain areas, there has been. We've seen, especially early on, they had the sugar shortage. Again, there's been shortages on certain items there. Again, as those sanctions kick in, there's certain things that they just can't get their hands on anymore. Now, where people really start to get angry, though, is when everyday food, everyday supplies, and everything across the board starts to increase in price. Now, that's going to take time, especially, again, as they're continuing to instate these sanctions here and continuing to roll them out. It's going to take time for the Russian people to feel that pressure, and then in turn pressure the Russian government. So here on screen, I guess I could bring this up real quick since we had it on screen. I totally forgot that I had that up there. This actually came from a user by the name of Unstinkable, long-time poster. And I guess I'll cover this really quickly. This happened, I believe, Sunday. This was posted 9 hours ago, but I believe this happened Sunday. This was a residential building missile attack on the 26th of June. We have a video here that I can show you on screen. Get that on screen for you guys here, and we will take a look. Don't mind the live audio we have coming out of Kharkiv in the background. In fact, I will pause that real quick so that we're not hearing those birds chirping over our report. Okay, so here is, again, this strike that occurred on a residential building, a missile attack on the 26th of June. I know we're hopping into our community aggregated stuff a little bit early, but I saw it over here on the corner of my eye, and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to cover that now. So Unstinkable had posted a little bit of information with this video to me. He says, someone started filming after the first missile hit, and the second one flies in very fast towards the end there. Can't see an explosion because the person filming freaked out and went back further inside, rightfully so. Of course, I would as well. I wouldn't have personally, I wouldn't be standing around this close to a cruise missile impact. But let's see here. We're going to watch this video again, coming out of Kiev.
Yeah,
so that was definitely a cruise missile there. And so you can actually see the cruise missile fly into frame here. They are pretty big, and they're pretty visible on these videos. I've mentioned this before. So if you just watch here, you'll see the actual cruise missile right there. So you can see it in the smoke cloud there at the tip of my mouse there. Right there, you can see it. Very obvious cruise missile shape there. Hold on, maybe I can full screen it. No, that's not gonna. It's gonna get all skewed. It's not gonna work. What I could do is, yeah, you can see it there. Yeah, that's a very typical cruise missile shape there. And again, we've seen many videos of these since the beginning of the war, and always spotting them flying in. Has been important in identifying them. You can very easily see that is a cruise missile there. Again, you can hear the blast right after she hits the deck here. Right there. Again, that strike happened in Kiev, 26th of June. That comes to us from Unstinkable on the Discord server. To get back to finishing our main headlines here. Let me get back to the newsroom, though. Let's go back to our primary newsroom. All right. So again, the last one we were talking about Russia defaulting on its foreign debt. In some other Russian news here, a Russian court set a July 1st start date for the trial of a U.S. basketball star, Brittany Griner, which we've talked about many times here on the show. Her lawyer told reporters Russian authorities arrested the WNBA star for allegedly carrying cannabis vaping products in February. That was days before President Biden announced sanctions against Russia for invading Ukraine. The U.S. government says Griner is wrongfully detained, and it assigned a hostage affairs envoy to work to get her released. The Russian judge ordered Greiner to remain in detention throughout the trial. According to her lawyer, she could face up to 10 years in prison if convicted. Again, we'll continue to bring you updates on Greiner's situation in the coming weeks. So I have an article here that actually has a little bit of information. This comes from AP, Associated Press, and I'm going to get it up on screen here for you guys. It has an aerial shot of I just posted it in the Situation Room if anybody's interested. It has an aerial shot of that strike that occurred, or the aftermath, sorry, of that strike that occurred on that mall in Ukraine. So you guys can see the level of devastation here and why that death count is still increasing. All right, let's go back over to our big screen here so we can get a look at what's going on here. As Mike Berry says, 10 years for CBD oil. Yeah, that's basically what she's looking at. 10 years just for, and it wasn't a lot. It was like a residue on the inside of her vape. It was just a little bit, and that was enough for them. Again, it's not about the weed at all. It's about the politics. That's really what it's about here. Anyway, again, this is the aftermath of that missile strike on that mall in Kremenchuk. Again, you can see here Ukrainian State Emergency Service firefighters working to extinguish that fire at that shopping center burned after that rocket attack in Kremenchuk, again, late Monday, June 27th. Russian long-range bombers struck that crowded shopping mall in Ukraine's central city of Kremenchuk with a missile on Monday, raising fears of what President Volodymyr Zelensky called an unimaginable number of victims in one of the most daring terrorist attacks in European history. One could argue that we have already been in kind of a state of what I call semi-total war. So there's this concept of total war. Some of you might be familiar with that, some of you might not. Basically, it just means that in World War II, for instance, we had total war, okay? It was where Nazi Germany, when they're bombing London, for instance, when they bombed London, they were doing it indiscriminately. They just wanted to level everything. All right, they bombed civilian homes, they bombed buildings, everything. It's total all-out war, meaning civilians are not off the table for strikes. Okay, so I think what we've been seeing here, arguably in Ukraine, has been kind of a weird state of like semi-total war, where they are striking. Increasingly, civilian targets, residential buildings, etc. I think eventually we might get to a point, especially if this this European Union candidacy goes through, that Russia might even get more aggressive in their stance, and we might see again more total war, so to speak. We've arguably already seen that in many towns and many cities in Ukraine. I mean, Mariupol, for instance. I mean, in Bucha. I would argue myself that is total war, all right? But again, there comes a point where the Russians are going to start to kind of cross that line, like what we're seeing here with this mall. There were no military units at this mall. There were no any type of military infrastructure here. There wasn't anything. It was a civilian target that they struck here at this mall. Again, I have a few pictures, actually, we can look through. You can see here, this is why that death toll is still increasing, is because they are still, at this hour, as I'm bringing you this report, they are still bringing people out of that rubble. They are still digging people out of that building. You can see a lot of these are volunteer and state emergency service firefighters doing this cleanup work here. I do see some military personnel in and amongst the mix, of course, as it is a strike that's being investigated. They're there to help as well. Yeah, absolute, just a sheer amount of destruction is unimaginable. Again, that death toll has now been increased. You can see a crater here from one of those strikes. That death toll has now been increased to 15 people. That wraps up our primary headlines for this evening. We're now going to switch over to our community aggregated reports. Again, we just brought you our first one from Unstinkable there. we're just going to go right through them tonight, and our first comes from, or our second, I should say, comes from Pyrotech. Big shout out to Pyrotech. Thank you so much for posting this, and not just that, but tuning back in. Always good to see a fellow Pyro in the live chats and tuning into the stream. Euromaidan Press, this comes at us from, verified on Twitter here, a video of ruined Popsana, Luhansk Oblast. The video shows Russian troops moving down Volistia, Miru, it's called, translated to Peace Street, with the ruined apartment and one family houses in occupied Popsana to the north. Let's take a look. You can see here the sheer amount of destruction on some of these buildings. Absolutely demolished. I would imagine being a Russian soldier and rolling through this area on your way to the front line and seeing the level of destruction here, especially while wearing what looks to be not even a full loadout of kit. I mean, they might just be not wearing helmets because of personal preference. Maybe they're not near a conflict area, so they're just rocking the hats maybe today. Not sure, but I mean, their kit doesn't look too, like they don't have a very developed loadout. I mean, that's just what I'm noticing here. Again, I'm not a military gear expert by any means, but I can kind of get a gist of what they're using here from watching this video. But anyway, point being, if I was one of these Russian soldiers on the way to the front line, this would not be very good for my morale. Seeing the utter level of destruction here. And we've seen proof of that. We've seen proof of morale being low amongst Russian ranks. Not just Russian ranks, but Ukrainian ranks have been affected as well. Morale is low on both sides of the war. As this, again, is dragged on for, it's now day 125. Being any type of military serviceman on the ground there, on whatever side, after being in this war for 125 days, I guarantee you both sides want this to end. When it comes down to it, again, absolutely just a devastating amount of destruction here in these towns and cities, and absolutely growing. A growing humanitarian crisis here occurring, a growing refugee crisis, one would argue as well. We're still seeing people flee Ukraine, even though a lot of people have come back to Ukraine, to places where Russian forces have pulled out of. We're still seeing a lot of people leaving the country. Anyway, again, this is a very good video of just evidence of just how much destruction has occurred in some of these towns and cities. And again, you can see here, plain for yourself, these are residential targets. I mean, there is cases where military personnel use residential buildings that have been evacuated for firing positions, etc., for mounting infrastructure. But when you see it on this wide of a scale, it becomes apparent that this is not just a war against the Ukrainian military, but this is a war directly against the Ukrainian infrastructure. This is a war against Ukraine as a country, okay? Ukraine as a people. But I would say, I mean, clear as day here, we could see in the evidence this is, I mean, obviously a war against their infrastructure. They're destroying everything. They're destroying not just military targets, but they're destroying power infrastructure, water infrastructure, heating and fuel infrastructure, things like gas pipelines and oil refining factories, not just oil factories, but all sorts of factories that produce all sorts of goods, not even things that are used in military production, but things like farming equipment, factories for fertilizers and things like that, for chemical processing plants, for hospitals, medication facilities. I mean, the list goes on. And again, I'd like to reiterate, this is a war. I mean, first of all, Russia is waging a war directly on Ukraine's infrastructure, and then second, directly against the people of Ukraine. Moving on, our next post here comes from Carbon, longtime contributor in the Situation Room. This comes from Kiev Independent, talks about the Bayraktar to donate drones. Ukrainians wanted to buy after crowdfunding. After Ukrainian comedian, politician, and volunteer Serhiy Prytula organized crowdfunding and raised $20 million to buy drones for Ukraine, Bayraktar refused to take the money, offering 3 drones for free. That's awesome. That's good stuff. Again, here's a Here's the actual press release here. It says Baykar has been informed that a crowdfunding campaign dubbed the People's Bayraktar was successful in raising funds to buy several Bayraktar TB2 UAVs for Ukrainians to use in defense of their homeland. Business leaders and ordinary people alike contributed funds, small and large, to reach this milestone within a matter of a few days' time. Baykar will not accept payment for the TB2s and will send 3 UAVs free of charge to the Ukrainian war front. We ask that raised funds be remitted instead to the struggling people of Ukraine. We are touched by their solidarity and resolve in the face of seemingly insurmountable challenges. Baykar prays for a just resolution and lasting peace. So again, if there's one hella good publicity stunt to do as a weapons manufacturer, is to donate 3 of your unmanned aerial vehicles to the underdog of Ukraine. This makes this company look hella good. I mean, first of all, okay, it's a really good move for them to. I mean, I'd be sending more if I was that company. I would personally be sending more. But I mean, I'm sure there are limits to what they can manufacture, what they can feasibly produce and send to Ukraine without totally destroying their company financially. So you got to think about that stuff, okay? But I mean, what they're doing here is incredible. All right, sending these 3 free UAVs, which again will most likely save countless lives and destroy countless Russian vehicles in the process. So again, that's good stuff, seeing that company send over that equipment. I wish we'd see a lot more companies doing stuff just like that. Our next post here comes from longtime contributor and power poster. That's what we've been calling him lately, Kayuka. This comes from Nexta. This talks about Jens Stoltenberg, again, that General Secretary of NATO, again, talking about basically the broad dialogue between NATO and Russia is no longer possible. NATO will increase the number of rapid reaction forces. Again, I mentioned this earlier, from 40,000 to 300,000. In addition, the alliance promises to increase support for Georgia and conduct more exercises there. So that's, again, very interesting reports coming from NATO, coming from that G7 leaders meeting as well over the week. Our next post here comes from Lords of Acid on the Situation Room. Thank you so much, Lords of Acid, for sending this over. This comes from an unverified Twitter source, so keep that in mind. It talks about Russia struck a shopping mall in Kremenchuk today, full of civilians, no military purposes whatsoever. We know now that this strike did happen. We know that, again, that there are no military there. That was confirmed. But again, every time we come across an unverified account, we always let you know ahead of time before we start reading you the report. Even though, we do have evidence that this did occur today. We know that the death count there has been increased to 15 civilians dead. There was no military purpose whatsoever to strike that facility. Again, kind of putting credit towards my argument of that we are in a state of, if not full total war, semi-total war between the Russians and Ukrainians at this time. All right, our next post. I actually have another one from Lords of Acid, so I'll be talking about that. This talks about and again, I got reports of this over the weekend as well, even though this was posted today, June 27th. This has been ongoing over the weekend. Russian group claims hack of Lithuania's sites in retaliation for that transit ban. I've been talking about that ban on imports into Kaliningrad, again, over the past week or so here. Big move, again, Russia coming out and saying, Lithuania, the people of Lithuania will pay and all this stuff, and saying, this is not acceptable, we will react. Lithuania is just like, nah, man, we are not good with you guys and what you're doing in Ukraine. We're going to stop all, actually, I think it's like 50% of rail imports that are going into Kaliningrad, again, which is that enclave, that Russian enclave there, which, again, borders it borders Lithuania. Lithuania is smack dab between Kaliningrad and Russia. And then you have Belarus right below Lithuania there. And so those goods are coming from Russia into Belarus, and then there's a short train journey across Lithuania that they need to take between Belarus and, as the middleman, and Kaliningrad. And so they're putting a stop to those imports, and that's why we're seeing this retaliation here via cyber attacks. Lithuania's state and private websites were targeted on Monday by Russian hackers who claimed the attack was retaliation for Vilnius's decision to cease the transit of some goods under the European Union sanctions to Russia's Kaliningrad exclave. So it's an exclave, sorry, not an enclave. Enclave means in, exclave is out, I'm pretty sure. Anyway, Lithuania's tax authority said in a statement it had halted all activities due to an unusually large number of attempts to connect to its systems, although all data was safe. So what this doesn't talk about here is that these attacks, this cyber activity has been occurring over the weekend into Monday, and has affected, again, multiple both state-ran and private websites. We're still waiting to get more information on those cyber attacks, on what's going on there with Lithuania and Kaliningrad. We'll keep you guys posted. Our next post here comes from Kayuka, again, our power poster. This comes from a unverified Twitter source by the name of Status6. Talks about Ukrainian military launched a new strike on Russian-occupied Zemini Island in the Black Sea. At least 10 hits were recorded. One of them targeted a Russian Pantsir S-1 air defense system. The Operational Command South informed the reporters there. Thank you so much, Kayuka, for sending that over. Our next post comes from Spitfire740 on the Discord server. Thank you so much, Spitfire, for sending this over. This comes from Euromaiden PR, unverified on Twitter. Talks about Shaman special forces of the Ukrainian military and causing havoc and fear in the Kremlin by blowing up military assets / depots across Russia and Belarus. Better start worrying because the shamans are coming, they say there. So, again, I'm not going to show you the possibly sensitive content there. Whatever they have there in that picture. But I will tell you that we have seen a fair number of strikes against ammo depots. I showed you in my last, I think it was my last report, actually, a big strike that was recorded by Russian forces via body cam footage on one of their ammunition depots, definitely in danger close. We've not only seen strikes on ammunition depots, but we've seen strikes on state and government-ran buildings. We've seen strikes on fuel facilities, fuel processing facilities. And so the Ukrainians are, again, they have been for some time, but they're increasingly putting pressure on the Russians on their own territory. Again, I talk about this quite often. I mention this almost every report, but this is not just a war that's occurring in Ukraine. It's a war that's occurring in Russia, on Russian territory. It's a war that has occurred on Moldovan territory now, and one could argue that this is a war that is occurring in many different states, as we've had drones crash land across borders. We've had you have effects, from the refugee crisis. You have effects from sanctions that people are feeling. You have the situation in Lithuania with Kaliningrad. So again, this is not just contained to Ukraine any longer, and I like to reiterate that as much as possible to people. Again, this is possibly eventually, if this continues on, going to grow into more than just what we call, the Ukrainian-Russian conflict, but into kind of a broader conflict here. Again, that's what we're starting to see here. Again, you see, as I mentioned a minute ago, you see those moves being made by NATO to increase readiness level, to increase just the amount of troops that they have for their rapid reaction force, things like that. You can kind of see, these. You can see these decisions being made in real time in reaction to how things are moving. So again, we're gonna have to keep our eyes peeled on that. Our next post here, we have one more for you guys here, comes from a user by the name of Gucci. Thank you so much, Gucci, for posting this. Comes from yesterday, June 26th. Reportedly in Pskov Oblast, shows a Russian freight train with ammunition that has derailed. You can see on screen there, picture of that ammunition. What was reportedly ammunition derailed on that freight train. We're now going to switch over into our open source reports. I'm going to get you guys filled in on what's been going on over the past 12 hours in Ukraine. And we might have a few repeat posts here, as we usually do, so keep that in mind. I'm going to start here. We actually have, so it looks like it's doing its thing. Sometimes Live UA Map can get a little glitched out when those late night siren reports come through. All right, so we're going to start here at the 11-hour ago mark. A report here saying that the U.S. believes that Ukrainian troops are inflicting significant costs on the Russians in the Donbass despite the threat from Severodonetsk. A senior defense official says the Ukrainians are making them pay for a very small piece of ground, the official said. Again, we've talked about that many times on the show. The Ukrainians, they're not letting that territory go easily. There are many Russians dying. There are many Ukrainians dying as well. I know we had reports on one of last week's report talking about there's about 1 to 200 Ukrainian servicemen dying every day on the front lines. And you can only imagine that with the Russians being on the offensive, that their daily death toll is probably much higher. Again, when you're in defensive positions, it's much easier to basically to it's much easier to defend than it is to attack. Okay, and so you're gonna lose more people attacking on the offense than you will defending a position. 11 hours ago, here we have that report about that strike on the mall. Again, it said at least 2 were killed at that time. So 11 hours ago, the death toll was 2. 20 wounded as a result of that Russian missile strike. We now know that is 15. Okay. So it has increased quite significantly. 9 hours ago here, 2 wounded as a result of explosion of a grenade in central Yalta. You can see a video here, I believe. Actually, this talks about this is just basically aftermath footage of them treating some of the wounded. Again, 2 were wounded in the explosion of that grenade in central Yalta. I'm not sure at this time if anybody succumbed to those injuries or not, but it does look like 2 were wounded there. Another post from Kremenchuk here, 9 hours ago coming in. It says, aftermath of Russia's rocket attack on Kremenchuk Mall that killed at least 11 people. So it had jumped to 11 people at that time. A video of Poltava Regional Governor Dmitry Lunin, who reported on that. You could see a picture here of that strike there. We'll watch this video here of them. Again, still pulling people out of the rubble at this hour, I believe, as I'm bringing you this report. You can see that the entire mall was just absolutely destroyed instantaneously. And so, again, for those that made it out alive, they were lucky. They were very lucky. Again, that death toll is expected to increase. The amount of wounded, I think, I haven't even gotten a concrete report of how many people have been wounded since that first report came out. I believe that wounded count has increased as well. So, again, I'll have to bring you updated numbers on that with tomorrow's report. 9 hours ago here, I just reported on this. This is the Bayraktar drones, which again are being sent over by that company. Eight hours ago here, it says the base destroyed today near Rodokovi had been very recently set up. So again, a base was destroyed here, a Russian base in the Luhansk region. See here if I can get, this is from Twitter here. I think we have an image, a satellite imagery here. So you can see here satellite imagery of them building up that base, and then it's destroyed. As you can see there, it was destroyed shortly after. So yeah, it does look like, again, that Russian base there in Luhansk was destroyed. Yeah, how far is that from Kremenchuk? It's a good question. How far is that from Kremenchuk? Where is Kremenchuk located? I know it's in the east somewhere, isn't it? I want to know how far it is from where that base was destroyed. Okay, so all right, so it's along the river. It's not too far from Dnipro. So yeah, I mean, it is pretty far. It is pretty far, but yes, some are speculating that maybe this was like retaliation. That the mall attack was retaliation for that base being destroyed. Again, we don't have anything further to go off of there. 8 hours ago here, it says 5 people killed, 22 wounded as a result of shelling in North Saldivka today. You can see here on the map where those strikes were located, not too far from Kharkiv. So again, the fighting, even though the Russians have pulled out of this area, there are still bombardments happening there on a daily. There are still people dying in Kharkiv, in and around these regions. And so, again, we're going to have to keep you guys posted and keep you guys informed on all of these strikes that are occurring, not just along the front line here, but in some of these areas that have even been retaken by the Ukrainians. We tend to lose focus on those areas, and I think that that's not a good idea because the Russians, they have a habit of when they pull out of somewhere, they like to bombard it extremely heavily, and they continue to attack it even though their troops have left the area. 8 hours ago here, Ukraine-Moldova report here, the two countries decided to expand the Berezino, Ukraine, Basa, Beskaska, again, that's a mouthful there, Moldova railway station, which will allow both to facilitate import-export from/to the port of Izmail on the Danube and avoid the Transnistrian region. So they're looking to bypass, if we look on the map here, so if you look on the map here, this shaded area here is Transnistria. That's that Russian breakaway region of Moldova. And so they're basically looking to bypass with the railway down to these ports here without having to go through the Transnistrian region with those rail lines. So they're building a new railway section which will allow them to do that. 8 hours ago, fire at a mine in Toretsk as a result of Russian army shelling. You can see where that located there, not too far from the front lines in the east here. 8 hours ago here, 8 people killed, 20 wounded as a result of Russian shelling in Lysychansk. You can see where that was located here, west of the Russian-held territory. 7 hours ago here, we have some video here of Ukrainian military destroying a Russian tank with an ATGM, a Stugna. I'm not sure. Is that different from the Stugna? Is this a Stugna? Is this a Stugna P? Or is this a different weapon system? It sounds like a Stugna. You see that confirmed hit there on that Russian vehicle, Russian tank with that ATGM. I believe they're referring to a Stugna P, which is that Ukrainian anti-tank guided munition system. Which arguably, I've said this multiple times, that should be the St. Javelin. The real St. Javelin here is the Stugna, and I've said this multiple times. I've seen, I think, more Stugna P videos than I have seen successful Javelin hits. I think. I could be wrong on that, but I'd like to see the statistics when this war, hopefully soon, comes to a close. I'd like to see what weapon system did more damage. The Ukrainian-made Stugna P, I believe that's Ukrainian-made. Again, I'm not a Ukrainian military gear expert here, but I'm pretty sure the Stugna P is Ukrainian. Yeah, it's a Ukrainian anti-tank guided missile system. Again, it was developed in the 2010s, so couldn't have been developed any sooner, actually, or any with any better timing there. Again, as just a few years later, we would see the annexation of Crimea, and then now, again, in 2022, we're seeing a full-out invasion of Ukraine. How much does the Stugna P cost? About 20,000%. At just 20,000%, the 71-pound three-person weapon is cheaper than the 178,000 per system Javelin. Sorry, excuse me. And keep in mind, it's Ukrainian-made, guys. There's nothing better than a Ukrainian-made weapon system. 7 hours ago, the United States condemned the bombing of the shopping center in Ukraine. The world is horrified by the Russian missile attack. Again, we reported on that attack in Kremenchuk earlier this evening. 7 hours ago, the Ukrainian Air Force says the shopping center in Kremenchuk was struck by a Kh-22 missile launched by Russian Tu-22 M3 bombers. The strike killed at least 10 and wounded another 40. So I have a wounded count here of 40. We know our kill count is up to 15 as of the last report I got about it. Which just came in like an hour ago or 2 hours ago. It was the kill count was updated to 15. I still don't have a concrete wounded count though at this time. 7 hours ago, President Zelensky says Russia has become the biggest terror organization in the world, saying that Russian attack on Kremenchuk is one of the most outrageous terror attacks in the history of Europe. The terrorists who did it have no place on earth. They did it on purpose, he says there. 7 hours ago here, explosions in Kharkiv after missile launches from Belgorod. Again, you can see where those are located there. 6 hours ago here, UN Security Council meets at Ukraine's request over Russian bombing. Over that bombing of that mall there in Kremenchuk. 6 hours ago here, the U.S. has trained about 1,200 Ukrainians on Western-provided weapon systems since Russia's full-scale invasion 4 months ago. Senior U.S. defense officials said, again, coming up soon, U.S. will train 50 more Ukrainians on HIMARS multiple launch rocket systems. Those are those U.S.-provided, I believe they're a little bit longer range missile systems, again, that they're going to be providing and training, again, 50 Ukrainian servicemen on how to use them. Again, coming directly from the G7 leaders, basically saying that Russia's abominable attack on Ukraine Mall is a war crime. So arguably we'll probably see a war crime investigation eventually into this attack that took place here. Again, hopefully whoever signed off on this attack will be held responsible in the future. Again, it killed 15 civilians, not Ukrainian military servicemen, but civilians here. And again, what I said earlier is kind of basically an act of total war, I would argue, at this point. 5 hours ago, battles are taking place in the directions of Veliki Prohody and Pitamink, Ruska, Lozova, and Tuspivka, Kozacha, Lopani, Zolochiv. So many different regions there. There's some battles occurring right now. So again, that's near Kharkiv. So that's in the north there, along that conflict line there. North of Kharkiv, that we're seeing a new uptick in the fighting there that is occurring in that region. 5 hours ago, death toll of missile attack at that mall in Kremenchuk increased to 15. So that was 5 hours ago. They increased that death toll to 15. CCTV video actually shows video of that Russian Kh-22 missile strike in Kremenchuk. So we do have video of that strike that we can show you here. So you can see, I believe that is the missile there flying through the air, which they are showing you. Again, part of the video is blurred to help protect, I believe, the location of the shooter. And you can see the plume there coming up from the mall as that missile struck. So there was multiple hits there. What looks to be multiple strikes that occurred there at that mall. 4 hours ago, President Biden says Russia's attack on civilians at the shopping mall is cruel. We stand in solidarity with the Ukrainian people, as demonstrated at the G7 summit. The U.S., along with our allies and partners, will continue to hold Russia accountable for such atrocities and support Ukraine's defense. That concludes our open source headlines. It concludes our reporting for this evening. We'll now switch over to a little bit of a Q&A with the live chat here. Actually, Miss Tiger Eye 912 says Reuters is reporting 16 people, so that's increased. One other person has died from that strike at that mall. Again, I don't know if that's confirmed or not yet. I'll have more information tomorrow. We'll have the concrete numbers hopefully by then as to how many wounded and were killed in that strike. But thank you so much, Miss Tiger Eye, for sending over that information. Thomas Parsons asks a very good question. He asks, so if/when this war escalates beyond Russia and Ukraine, will Russia have any allies? You could guarantee it. Yeah. You would argue, I would argue that Belarus will get fully involved. I would argue that some of the BRICS states will get involved, possibly China. However, China has a lot to lose. However, they have a lot to take with Taiwan as well. So we're going to have to keep our eyes peeled. We're going to have to keep our eyes on that situation for sure. Miss Tiger 912 says Russia is about to lose big time. This Lithuania stuff is ramping up. If they attack Lithuania, NATO will have to jump in. Yes, that would happen almost immediately. We hope that it won't go that far. Hugo, thank you so much for tuning in tonight, man. He says, hey, Nemico, good to see you, man. Good to see you as well. Hugo, I hope everything is going good out there in L.A. and California. I hope your guys' gas prices aren't too high. Jillian Lips, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Says, thank you, Messiah, for the reports. Thank you so much, Jillian, for tuning in this evening. We'll have more reports coming at you all week. Yeah, there are, as some dude says, some dude in reply to Thomas Parsons says probably most, if not all, countries on the poor terms with the USA. Yeah, and that's what we could expect. If there was a full-out conflict between the United States, NATO, and Russia, we would see involvement from a lot of different countries that have been on poor terms with the U.S., with the West in general. So maybe Iran. Syria, maybe. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to tell. I'm not a geopolitical military expert here by any stretch of the imagination, but I can tell you with a fair degree of certainty that there will be allies, as there's been allies over the course of the war in Ukraine. I mean, if you think about it, Chechen fighters went in. You had some Belarusian involvement here, or at least cooperation from Belarus. You have the Transnistrian region there. You have China, kind of half supporting Russia. Again, you have countries that have decided not to cease trading with Russia. So there's a lot of different variables here at play. Miss Tiger 912 says, I did hear China's shipments to Russia have slowed. Yes, I've also heard similar reports, but I would say it's not to the degree of it being like a sanction. China is still openly supporting Russia, I would say. Tiki Jakey says, Nemico Network, has the cyber... This is a good question, actually. He says, has the cyber aspect of this war been under or overwhelming compared to your expectations? Well, so that's a yes and a no, okay? In some ways, it's been underwhelming. I expected early on for there to be more cyber attacks on primary infrastructure, which there were a lot of. I also expected, though, that there would be cyber attacks against directly against Western government sites and stuff like that. We haven't seen too much in that regard yet. However, on the other side of the spectrum, there has been an overwhelming amount of cyber attacks occurring, okay? Like, we're talking, I mean, right now as I'm talking to you, there are Russian cyber attacks occurring on Ukrainian territory and abroad, right now as I'm speaking to you. We're talking things like DDoS. We're talking things like, you have operators that are actively trying to breach systems and to penetrate networks that are happening right now as we speak. You have military operators, Russian military operators that are on the ground in Ukraine that are trying to penetrate Ukrainian communications infrastructure, all sorts of stuff, as the Ukrainians are doing to the Russians. The Ukrainians are doing the same thing back. Again, this cyber aspect is as much a weapon of war now as the Kalashnikov AK-47, as those HIMARS systems, as our javelins, as our Student MPs. I've said this multiple times that I would say 50% of the fighting, if you were to take into account every bullet fired, every grenade thrown, every cyber attack launched, every DDoS, every account hacked, everything, if you were to account all of these events that you would consider an attack, right, and tally them all up, I would say 50% are cyber related. Okay, so it's very important to think about that. And I've talked about this many times on the show before. It's not just Ukraine that's at risk for these cyber attacks. It is all of us. We are all at risk from cyber actions being taken out by Russian, not just the Russian government, but Russian entities as well. So I say that because there are entities within Russia that act separate from the government, but are also kind of led and I would say maybe pushed in the right direction by some of these government agencies, mostly intelligence services, I would think, are possibly interacting with some of these entities within Russia, which are, taking out some of these attacks, so that they can. Russia has some kind of they have a fallback. They could say, "Hey, no, it's not us. We didn't take out this attack on this pipeline or this infrastructure site or whatever. It was these guys, this criminal hacker group within our country." And then one of those guys gets a slap on the wrist, misdemeanor, or sent to jail for a little while, whatever, and they're able to again deflect blame. T and SNZ, thank you so much for tuning in this evening. Thank you so much for stopping by, getting filled in on what's going on in Ukraine. To all of you guys that stopped by tonight, thank you so much. This is about all the time we have left, again, as we come on to our 1 hour mark. If you missed tonight's report, you can find it over on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Nemico Network. I'll have it uploaded there within the next hour or two here. Again, if you're looking for any of the links or any of our sources, any of our information, you can find it in the description below. If not there, you can find it over on our Discord server. That's discord.gg/Nemico. You can find a link to that in the description below. New reports every weekday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Sometimes we do them a little bit late. Sometimes we do them a little bit early. Keep an eye on the community posts on the YouTube channel over on our Discord server announcement channel. That's where you can find out what we're doing, when we're going to be online, when we're going to be uploading, and keep you guys updated on everything that we're doing. That's the best place to do that. Let me see here. If you haven't already, hit that like button. Best way to get the algorithm's attention. Best way to get this information to the hands of more people. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button. Best way to get notified when new videos or new live streams go live. I actually had a poll going earlier today. A poll. Let's see. Let's check the poll real quick. Let's go over to the YouTube channel. I have a poll going. If I can bring that up here. So earlier I put out a poll saying, asking people if you get notified when our new videos or streams go live. So these are people that even have selected the all. When you hit the notification bell on YouTube, you can hit that all button. 66% of you guys say YouTube is not feeding you guys notifications. It's probably just, again, due to just the kind of content we're doing here with reporting. But that's unfortunate. The algorithm is just not notifying our subscribers when new videos and live streams go live. Best way you can make sure you get notifications is hit that like button and then hit the all setting. But then on top of that, check back in every so often. Again, we do new reports every weekday, uploading videos almost on a weekly basis. So the best way to get that stuff is, again, make sure to just kind of tune in, check in, see what we're doing here on the channel. 66% of you guys say you're not getting pushed notifications from YouTube. So that's unfortunate, and we'll be taking a look into that in the coming weeks. To all of you guys that are tuning in tonight, again, thank you so much for stopping by, again, taking some time out of your day to get informed of what's been going on. We'll be back here tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, with a report on Ukraine. Until next time, guys, you are watching Nemico Network.
Something that will change our daily lives, that will change history, 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 that will change history. That will be the most beautiful day.